Okay, so this is where we stopped. You should have your drawing at this point. And so now let's go ahead and take some time to look at a little bit of a review. Keep in mind that cells are the most basic unit of life. We know that we need more cells, or we need cells to create more cells. We know that cells are able to completely function on their own. We also know that we have prokaryotic cells, which are your most simple, smallest cells. They have no nucleus, no membrane bound organelles, and that focus of the prokaryotic cells are your bacteria. Bacteria are super, super simple. Them not having a nucleus and their DNA just floating freely around makes them a very simple cellular structure. We, of course, are eukaryotic cells, and so we do have nucleus or nuclei that surround our DNA, and we do have all those membrane bound organelles. The reason I'm bringing that up is because when we compare cells and viruses, we tend to always compare a virus to a bacterial cell, because a bacterial cell is the most simple of all the cells. So that's where our focus is going to be. Here's a really cool size comparison for you. Viruses are small. They're 100 times smaller than some of your smallest bacteria. And keep in mind that human cells are much larger than bacterial cells. So when it comes to being able to see a virus, you usually need an electron microscope. And electron microscopes can see things as small as subatomic particles like protons, neutrons, and electrons, and can also view, of course, DNA. There's a very unique structure to viruses compared to bacterial cells. And if you look at this slide in particular, you can really see that both are very simple, and they actually do have some things in common. You can see the pili around the bacterial cell, which are those little hair-looking structures. And then if you look at the viral cell, or excuse me, the virus, not the viral cell, if you look at the virus, you have these little proteins that sort of stick out that look similar to the hairy structures that are on the bacteria. Of course, they serve completely different purposes, as we'll find out a little later. Some viruses have DNA, some have RNA, just depends on the type of virus that it is. Viruses also have a lot of different overall structures. Not all viruses look exactly the same. One other big difference that I think I should point out is majority of our cells either have, or all cells have a cell membrane. Some of them have a cell wall. Think plants and a lot of your bacterial cells. But your viruses have what's called a capsid. And that capsid is that protective layer that surrounds it. And it's much different from your cells. This just shows you a little bit more important information comparing bacterial cells and viruses, what's considered living, what's not living. In terms of numbers, you'll see that bacterial cells are considered unicellular. We don't consider viruses to be living, so they don't have cells. One of the things we're going to spend some time looking at too is how do we treat problems with bacteria, like bacterial infections, compared to viral infections. And this talks about that a little bit more in the diagram. Also, keep in mind some of our bacteria and viruses could potentially be used in positive ways. Bacteria, there's some that are good for us, and viruses, there's actually a lot of viruses that we can use to help out with some illnesses. And of course, I wanted to also share this with you too and show you comparison of bacteria and viruses and some of the illnesses that we're very familiar with. Notice cold and flu, they're all viruses, and we cannot use antibiotics, which are what kill bacterial infections. We can't use those for viruses. We do have some illnesses like bronchitis that can be viral or bacterial. We also have meningitis can be viral or bacterial. Pneumonia can be viral or bacterial also. As far as this chart goes, I know I'm going through some of this very quickly. We're going to actually come back to this a little bit later, and so there's no need for this to be filled out just yet. We'll talk about this in greater detail. I really just wanted to give you a quick overview to go with the slides and just talk to you in general about bacterial cells versus viruses, because tomorrow we're going to get into detail with what a virus actually is and some of the parts of it and how the replication process sort of goes.